Hello and welcome to the Ilene Silverman Show. I'm your host Ilene, and on this week's program, our guest, Sharon Gloger-Friedman, author of Ashes, historical novel that shares the story of a Jewish immigrant family and the infamous Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for our program. I am delighted to introduce my guest, Sharon Gloger-Friedman, award-winning author of the historical fiction Ashes. And Sharon, it is a delight and an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's a
true
pleasure to be here. It really is. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you for writing this wonderful novel, Ashes, which I have devoured from cover to cover because I've cried, I've laughed, I've been moved. It is absolutely wonderful,
well,
and I know
you.
This is its debut, your debut as a novelist.
It is.
And well done. And you've won several awards.
Yes, we have it. The awards were nice because, you know, when you're a first-time novelist, you think, well, your friends and your family are going to buy it, and that would probably be 35 copies. So the award was very nice. It was very good. It gave me the confidence that the book had a story to tell. So it was nice. It felt good to get the awards. It definitely did.
Well, well deserved. And we are looking forward to the opportunity for your book signing, which will be coming up on a Wednesday evening, March 11th, right here in Gainesville at the downtown headquarters library.
Yes.
That beautiful room upstairs at 6:30 p.m.
I know. I'm looking forward to it. I really hope that people will come out. I love to talk about the book and have people ask questions. It's great when readers interact, and it's what you live for when you write a book. So
well, we're
nice.
Getting the word out, so you are going to have a great attendance, and I'm looking forward to being there.
Thank you.
And settle back for a minute and give us perspective about yourself. Okay, you're a proud Gator.
Yes,
went to the University of Florida.
Yes.
Where you met your wonderful husband.
Yes, the best part of my education. Yeah.
But go back, tell us a little about yourself and why you chose to write this book, Ashes, and the topic you're covering, because what that really goes back to is your family, your history, and we all love our own personal history, and I think within your story we find our own.
Oh, that's lovely. Yes, thank you. I had this book in my head for about 40 years, actually. Wow. Because I grew up in this wonderful, loving family, my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles. They were my grandmother's sisters and their spouses, and I actually lived with my grandmother for 1 year. She was not well, and I spent a year living with her. And in that year, I had the opportunity to hear wonderful stories about how they came to this country. Not such wonderful stories about the conditions they worked under. They all went to work in the garment industry. And I even spent time with my grandfather taping his stories, and they just kept coming back to me. This is my first novel, but I had been writing for most of my career. I was in direct marketing, which is brochures and newsletters and things like that. So when I retired, I kind of ran out of excuses for not writing the book. And I started putting down, but it required a lot of research too.
Oh, how long did you spend on research? Because this book, it's meticulous in its detail.
Thank
its
you.
accuracy.
Yes, I really worked hard to bring the real story. It took me 2.5 years to write and research, and it started out with a broad sense of research, and then as I started writing, would whittle down and whittle down. A lot of it, though, I comes from the stories I heard,
Right.
and other first story accounts of the fire. My family was not in the fire. They came the year after to this country a year
Afterwards.
But the stories I heard growing up were of when they came and lived in the tenements, there were families that had lost loved ones or had been in the fire. And so
So it was like a direct connection.
Yes.
And just to explain for those who don't know, and the title Ashes reflects that fire, what fire are you referring to and when?
We're talking about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, yes, and it happened in 1911. It was a horrible event. 146 young men and women lost their lives in the fire, and about 50 odd jumped from windows. The reason that it was so horrendous is that the owners were not careful and did not follow the safety regulations.
And there were even regulations back then. There were just so many things that needed to be corrected that this fire was the turning point for that.
Exactly.
And we have so much more to talk about, but we're going to take just a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back talking about the historical fiction Ashes. And Sharon, there's so much to say about the book, and I know we went to the fire, which is the end of the book.
Right.
So take us back to the beginning so people will understand, appreciate the timeline of the start. 1903.
1903. Ashes at its core is a family story, and it's an immigrant story, and it opens up in 1903 in Russia, in Kishinev, Russia. And in 1903, it started on an Easter Sunday. There was a pogrom that swept through the village, and it was promulgated by rumors of deaths and just a lot of misinformation. But the family gets caught in it. They lose their home, they lose their business, they suffer a tragedy, and they leave Russia. They actually have to leave under difficult circumstances because it was hard for families to leave, Jewish families to leave Russia at the time. And they come to New York City, as many immigrants did.
Yes, my own family. I feel it, I see it.
Yes, and thinking that this is going to be a wonderful new life, and they come there and live with the main characters, one of the main characters' sisters, and find themselves in the tenements, and learn very quickly that all is not as they had thought it would be.
And your description, number one, of the pogrom, I'm Jewish. I grew up with Jewish history and understanding, but I don't think I've ever understood as thoroughly the terror of a pogrom until I read your book, Until Ashes, or it felt I could really absorb the Lower East Side or coming to America and what it was like. Your writing of it is so poignant and clear and speaks to the heart. And yes, as you say, it's a family story above all.
Yes, and it reflects, again, experiences of real people. My research took me I did not only depend on what I heard from my family, but did really heavy research into what life was like then. And the stories were very, they were horrible to read, some of them, and yet these people, not only did they persevere, they were successful.
Yes, they survived. Didn't just survive, they thrived.
Yes, and at that time, the young women worked a lot to support the men who were studying or to put brothers through school.
Right.
So it was difficult for them, and yet everything was to make a better life for their children and all of that.
But the conditions and really the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory had to be the worst of any. The owners, the foremen, the conditions, the long hours. I think some people even now would go, how is that possible?
I know.
How did our country accept that?
I know, and what it was is the owners preferred to hire young immigrant women, one, because they didn't know if they had any rights or not, and two, they would work for less. But they were so afraid that these women would steal from them that they locked the doors. And that was one of the contributing factors to the fire. There were rags on the floor, oil from the sewing machines.
Paper patterns.
Exactly, hanging from... And
it was like an inferno waiting to go up.
That's exactly what it was. And when a cigarette set it off, somebody threw a cigarette and went to a can of oil, and it just went up immediately. And there was only one elevator to take them down. There was only one fire escape that would not hold enough people.
Right.
And
and the fire extinguisher was rotted. No
exactly.
buckets of water
around.
And then the firemen couldn't even reach the top 3 floors of the building.
That's right.
Where they were trapped.
The hose would not go all the way up, and the ladder would not go all the way up, so that they and many young women just chose to jump. And there were young men involved too, but mostly young women.
And your description of the unions, the beginning of the unions, the strike, again, beautifully researched. It's like we were there. We were there through your book.
Thank you. The strike, the 3 major events in there are the pogrom, the strike, and eventually the fire. And the young women went on strike to get better hours, better pay, better safety accommodations for them. Unfortunately, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire owners did not give them everything they wanted. So when they went back to work, they were going back to work in an unsafe condition anyway. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's hard to believe that it all transpired as it did, because we're grateful that things have changed.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, and that was part of the reason why that terrible fire. We're going to take another quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back talking with author Sharon Gloger Friedman, and I'm pleased to introduce our friend Connie Stern. Connie.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Good
Well,
to be with you both.
I'm delighted to have you join us because it's because of you, Connie, that I have gotten to know Sharon and have her as a guest on the show, and thank you very much for that.
It's delightful to have you both know each other now and be on the show and to introduce Sharon's book, Ashes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know, we say in life, it used to be the joke, 2 degrees of separation, 1 degree of separation now, if that. And I think the three of us sitting here together exemplifies that.
I agree.
And there we have so much more to cover. But Sharon, go back to the results of that fire and some of the changes that came about for the better.
Yes, definitely. The one good thing that came out of it as a result of this fire, which by the way is the worst fire up until 9/11. This was the worst fire in New York City. Were that regulations were changed, not only on a state level but on a federal level, to increase the safety issues and rectify them, to make sure the girls had better working conditions. In terms of their salary and their and other areas, like not having to pay for their
Right.
their needles and the thread and all that, that came about through the general strike that took place in New York City, where all of the garment worker industry came out and struck
Yes.
the garment.
Everything came to a standstill.
Yes, it
Yes,
did.
it took that.
It did, and it took months to get where they were going. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory did not get all their demands met, and unfortunately, that was the fire was the result. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Hadassah Book Club, which Connie is a member of at our congregation B'nai Israel, thank you for being part of the upcoming book signing.
I'm looking forward to it very much in March at the downtown headquarters library.
Right,
It's
that
going
Wednesday,
to be
March
beautiful.
11th.
Yes,
Yes.
at 6:30.
And I know that the book club members are all reading Ashes,
Yes,
and you know, there's so many themes that resonate with everyone, but I think particularly with us as women.
Definitely.
First, an underlying theme that it touches to everyone's heart is friendship, Sharon.
Yes, definitely. And I think what comes out of this book, too, is how the young women who worked in the factory came together to support each other and loved each other and formed friendships that, were bonds more than friendships.
And defended each other. I mean, when you talk about the strike, we're just saying the word strike, but the strike was horrendous. The strike, it was like pogroms. The police looked on
Right.
and winked, and they were part of it. Everyone was like being paid off. It was a tragic part of our history.
It was.
Where we don't even, some of us, realize what it was like. And the friendship too between the parents, the children, husbands, wives, it just you're won't give it away. But the way you go through each of the main characters and trace their lives and bring it all together at the end is beautiful, and the
Thank you.
bonds between those women
Yeah.
are just it just, as I said, it's very moving.
Thank
And here you are
That's
with your
right.
good friends.
That's right.
It's like what we all.
I know, and as you get older too, you realize the worth of these friendships. But these young women really, they took care of each other. They looked
did.
out for each other. They
They
were in a
did.
terrible situation where they were working, but when they left, they were friends. When they came out at the end of the day, they were friends, but they were still looking out for each other.
They did. And one big issue is something we still are grappling with, and that's spousal abuse. There is a husband
Yes.
that, I mean, the tension in that family home leaps off the pages. It's just,
Yeah.
you want to go in there and do something for them.
Right, you do, and that again speaks to the fact that these families looked after each other and tried to help each other out. There is an unfortunate marriage in there, and a husband who's abusive not only to his wife and to his children, and it also speaks to a very sad part of that tenement life. It was not unusual, not necessarily for the men to abuse their families, but to leave their families too, because of the stress and the inability to support them.
And that is still happening today in different ways.
Yes.
We're talking about that we were all immigrants at one time, and there's everybody who goes through maybe the same cycle, and your book, Ashes, and our own memories through our family should help us to have compassion and appreciate more the diversity that we all bring to
our country,
our country
Definitely,
and to
definitely.
our own communities.
Yes.
And we're going to take another quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back talking about the historical novel Ashes. And Sharon and Connie, talk a little more about the significance of March. Well, you're coming for the book signing March 11th.
Yes, well, there's two actually. And March 25th is the anniversary of the fire, and so that carries a lot of weight. And
Exactly.
And go ahead, Connie.
We will be at the downtown library on the top floor. It's a beautiful room, having a wonderful book signing and hearing more from Sharon about her book in depth. And
it's also, isn't it the
Yes.
celebration of the 100th
yes,
Anniversary of women's
rights? Yes.
Right, women's
Right to
suffrage
vote.
and the right to vote.
Yes.
All coming together March 2020. And you will have books, talking about the book signing, you will have Ashes books available for
yes,
purchase.
yes.
And how, if someone wants to read it ahead of time?
It's available online.
Okay, good.
Yeah, on both digital and the paperback, so you can get it either way.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I still like to hold a book, and thank you, because Connie immediately gave me a copy,
I
which
did.
I have thoroughly enjoyed. And it has a lot of relevance, this book, to, well, you've talked about your family history, but even the names of the characters, there's a lot of you.
Yes, there
in this
definitely
book.
is. This is kind of a little inside information, but the characters in the books are named after my relatives, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and on both sides of my family. It was just, they inspired the story. It was my way of kind of telling them how much I love them still and put them in the book. So yes, and it's very special to me. It's a very personal story, and it speaks to the resilience of the spirit of our ancestors, the people who came here. And I'm grateful for the stories they told me as well.
I agree. I keep saying I need to know more. I'm grateful to my grandparents, who I never got to know, to be brave enough to come to America, to start another life. And everyone I meet, you know, we talked about the themes in the book, the immigrants that come here. My own husband, whose family went from England to Australia to America, it takes courage.
Oh, it does. They came here, they did not know what they were coming to. And,
Right.
And they didn't know the language. I mean, think about it. And they left behind
I don't think I would have the
possessions.
strength.
Yeah.
It's unthinkable,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. I mean, and the voyage over here, and some. I've heard stories of young boys, like 13 and 14, coming over with all by themselves, and establishing their lives here.
And making
Yeah.
a life. I know, it's just, to me, incredible. And as you said, it speaks to the human spirit. And there are other parts of this book. You talk about prejudice and other themes that were back then that we are still dealing with today.
Right, exactly. And they came in there kind of inadvertently. I can't say that I set out to do that, but as the book evolved, these themes surfaced because those were the issues of the day.
Yeah, they were the facts.
And unfortunately, they're still hanging
Oh,
around today.
I know,
So,
they are.
Yeah,
They are. We're still grappling with many of the same issues. Now, I have to know, do you have another book inside of you?
I'm working on one now. I'm struggling, I'll admit it, but I'm forging ahead. And again, it's historical fiction, and so there's a lot of research. And I like to research, so I research a lot.
Well, you said you spent 2.5 years to research
And right,
ashes.
yes, that's
and
And it shows.
Thank you.
it definitely shows.
Yeah, thank you.
And because it is so accurate, it really helps us understand the place and the time and what people were grappling with and how they lived. I had the privilege with my husband Harvey of taking a tour of the Lower East Side a few months ago and the tenement tour. And when you were describing, and I was reading Ashes, and that's one reason I wanted to do it, but when you were describing it, and then I was in the tenements and looking at them, they preserve too, so you can have like a very small tour. It was incredible.
It was a hard life, but in some instances it was a good life because of the way the families came together. When I sit and I think about the stories I heard, you can tell the love that was there in the families, and you could tell how they loved each other and loved their friends.
I know,
it's an
that's what
inspiration
shines
for
through.
me. Yeah.
That is what shines through with the book. And so once again, we're looking forward to having you come back to Gainesville.
Yes.
We'll be at the Downtown Library, Alachua County Public Library headquarters on Wednesday, March 11 at 6:30 p.m. So we get to hear you talk about the book, we get to have a book signing, and talk with, not just listen to you, but talk with each other, because
Yes.
many will come there to share their own ideas, having already read the book. So it's a great time for women and men.
Yes.
We invite
Yes,
everyone
yes.
to network.
Yes, and I hope that when people attend, they come with questions and are willing to share the stories. The stories just, when I hear that, it makes everything worthwhile about the book. It really does.
Well, I want to thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Connie, for bringing Sharon here. And thank you, Sharon,
Thank
and
you.
your husband, George, for
Yes.
coming and being a part of our show. It's truly a privilege.
Thank you.
And
For me
your,
too.
well, your book is outstanding, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilene.
My pleasure. And I'm so glad that you tuned in. I hope you will join us next week. Take care.